6 months after her mother's disappearance, Sarah finds herself at her father's wedding to a mysterious woman. But a secret safe, an enigmatic flash drive, and an anonymous message will change everything. What seemed like a simple wedding was, in fact, the beginning of a major scandal. The elegant church in New York City was filled with guests for Richard and Isabella's wedding. Murmurs echoed between the century-old columns as Sarah, Richard's daughter, observed the scene with a mixture of indignation and sadness. Only 6 months had passed since Helen, her mother, had left for a long spiritual journey to India, leaving behind an enigmatic letter and many unanswered questions. Sarah adjusted her navy blue dress, chosen purposefully to demonstrate her silent protest against this hasty union. At 25, a law graduate and minority partner in Thompson Enterprises, she couldn't accept that her father, Richard Thompson I, of the country's most respected businessman, could move on so quickly. The buzz increased when Isabella appeared at the church entrance. At 35, she was 15 years younger than Richard and brought with her an aura of mystery that intrigued New York's high society. A successful executive, she had arrived in the city just a year ago, assuming the position of financial director in a competing company. Richard, at the altar, nervously adjusted his tie with poorly disguised nervousness. His eyes, however, did not show the typical happiness of a groom. There was something more there, a restlessness that only Sarah seemed to notice. She knew that look well. It was the same one her father displayed during tense board meetings, when something wasn't going according to plan. In the front row, Grandma Betty, the matriarch of the Thompson family, held her rosary firmly, murmuring inaudible prayers. At 78, she also didn't approve of this hasty marriage, but maintained her aristocratic posture, as she had always done in times of family crisis. The ceremony proceeded like a well-rehearsed spectacle, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something much bigger was about to happen. Her suspicions began when, days earlier, she found her father destroying documents in his office during the early hours. Then, there was that mysterious call he received during the rehearsal dinner, causing him to turn pale and leave in a hurry. During the reception, in the ballroom of the traditional Metropolitan Club, Sarah observed the behavior of the guests. Important executives from Thompson Enterprises talked in small groups, exchanging significant glances. Mark Anderson, the charming newly hired international consultant, seemed especially interested in Richard and Isabella's movements. "Don't you find it strange?" whispered a familiar voice beside her. It was Emily, her best friend since college and current head of the company's legal department. "Your father signed the transfer of 40% of the shares to a holding company in the Cayman Islands last week, and now this wedding." Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. Emily's words confirmed her suspicions that something was very wrong, happening behind the scenes of this union. Her lawyer's instinct screamed that this wedding was just the tip of a much larger iceberg. In a moment of distraction from the guests, Sarah sneaked into the private office her father maintained at the club. She needed to find something, any clue that could explain this rush to marry Isabella. That's when her cell phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number. "Look in the safe behind the Pollock painting. The password is the date of the diagnosis." Her heart raced. What diagnosis? And how did that mysterious person know about the safe that only the family knew about? With trembling hands, Sarah approached the painting. The date. What date? Her mind flew to 3 months before her mother's departure, when Helen began to act strangely, making sudden trips to clinics and hospitals. The safe opened with a soft click when she entered the date, 03/15/2023. Inside, there was only a golden flash drive with the initials HT engraved. Before she could grab it, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Quickly, she closed the safe and put the painting back in place. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" Mark Anderson's voice surprised her. "Your father is looking for you. It's time for the newlyweds toast." She forced a smile, her brain working a mile a minute. "I'm coming," she replied, but her mind was fixed on the flash drive she had just discovered. What had her mother left there? And why did someone want her to find it right now? Upon returning to the ballroom, Sarah noticed something different in Isabella's behavior. The bride was discreetly conversing with a man she had never seen before, exchanging tense glances. When their eyes met, Isabella quickly looked away, but not before Sarah noticed the flash of concern in her eyes. The rest of the party passed like a blur for Sarah. While the guests danced and celebrated, her mind was focused on three fundamental questions. What was on that flash drive? Who was the mysterious messenger who had guided her to it? And what was the real reason behind this hasty marriage? It was past 2 in the morning when the last guest began to say goodbye. Sarah watched her father and Isabella get into the limousine that would take them to the airport, from where they would depart for their honeymoon in the Maldives. But something in Isabella's smile deeply disturbed her. It was as if she held a secret that could change everything. "How long until the truth comes out?" Emily murmured, appearing again by her side. Sarah squeezed the small key she had found fallen near the safe in her pocket. "Not long," she replied, determined. "And when it does, nothing will be the same again." What Sarah didn't know was that at that very moment, Helen was closer than anyone could imagine, and the events that would unfold in the coming weeks would shake the foundations not only of the Thompson family, but of the entire business empire built over generations. The morning after the wedding, Sarah woke up with a strong headache and the unsettling feeling that something important was about to happen. The flash drive found in the safe seemed to burn in her drawer, but she knew she needed to be cautious. Years of experience as a lawyer had taught her that timing was everything. Emily arrived at her apartment punctually at 9, carrying a folder full of documents and her inseparable laptop. The two friends had agreed to work from home, away from the curious eyes of the company. The real reason, however, was different. They needed to investigate the contents of the flash drive without raising suspicions. "You won't believe what I found out," said Emily, spreading papers on the coffee table. "I've been researching Isabella's past. Before coming to New York, she worked at 3 major companies in Los Angeles. All of them faced mysterious financial problems a few months after her departure." Sarah frowned, serving 2 cups of the special coffee her mother always loved. "Coincidence? Unlikely. And there's more. I found records of a company in the Cayman Islands with the same name as the holding company your father transferred the shares to. Guess who's one of the directors? Marina Bell." "And who is Marina Bell?" Emily smiled triumphantly. "Isabella's name before she legally changed it 5 years ago." The sound of the cup hitting the saucer echoed through the room. Sarah felt her heart race. Her intuition had been right from the beginning. Something was very wrong with this story. With trembling hands, she took the flash drive and inserted it into the laptop. An error message appeared on the screen. "Encrypted file. Enter password." "Damn it!" exclaimed Sarah. "We need the password." At that moment, her cell phone vibrated again. It was the same unknown number from the night before. "The password is on the last postcard she sent. Look beyond the written words." Sarah ran to her room and rummaged through her memory box until she found the postcard her mother had sent from India 3 months ago. The image showed the Taj Mahal at sunset, and on the back was only a short message. "Sometimes, love takes us on unexpected paths. Take care, my flower, with love, Mum." Emily examined the card minutely. "Look at this," she exclaimed, pointing to small, almost imperceptible dots under some letters. "They're Morse code markings." After a few minutes deciphering the code, they got the password, Phoenix Project 2024. The flash drive revealed its contents, dozens of meticulously organized folders, typical of Helen's perfectionism. The first folder contained photos of secret meetings between Thompson Enterprises executives and foreign businessmen. In one of them, Mark Anderson appeared in a luxurious restaurant in Dubai 2 years before being hired by the company. "Sarah, look at this date." Emily pointed to the metadata of one of the photos. "This was before your father even met Isabella. They were already planning something." More files revealed a complex network of financial transactions, all converging, on a project called Phoenix. The name made Sarah remember something she had overheard in an argument between her parents, months before Helen left. "The Phoenix Project can't come to light, Richard. You don't understand what's at stake." An audio file caught the attention of the two friends. It was a recording of a conversation between Isabella and an unidentified man. "Everything is going according to plan. Helen is out of the way, and soon we'll have full control. Richard suspects nothing. Sarah felt her world spin. Her mother hadn't simply left for a spiritual journey. She had discovered something big enough to need to distance herself. But why? And what was the true nature of the Phoenix Project? A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Through the peephole, Sarah saw Mark Anderson standing in the hallway holding a folder. Her heart raced. How did he know where she lived? "Miss Thompson?" His voice sounded muffled through the door. "We need to talk. It's about your mother." Emily quickly put away the documents while Sarah hid the laptop. After a quick exchange of glances, she opened the door. Mark entered with his usual elegance, but there was something different in his eyes. An urgency that Sarah had never seen before. "I'm sorry to show up unannounced, but after the wedding, I realized I can't postpone this conversation any longer. Your mother contacted me 3 months before she left." Sarah felt her legs weaken. "What do you mean?" "She discovered something about the Phoenix Project, something big enough to put the entire Thompson empire at risk. It wasn't safe for her to stay here, so I helped with her strategic departure." "Do you know where my mother is?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Mark took an envelope from the folder. "Not exactly, but she gave me this to deliver when it was safe. I believe that moment has come." The envelope contained a recent photo of Helen in front of a mirrored building in Singapore, holding a newspaper from the day before. On the back, there was only one sentence. "Follow the money, darling. The truth is in the numbers." At that moment, Sarah's phone rang. It was Grandma Betty, and her voice sounded alarmed. "Sarah, come to my house immediately. I just received a very strange visit. A woman claiming to be a partner in a company in the Cayman Islands. She knows about your grandfather's Swiss safe." Sarah looked at Mark, who remained impassive. "There's one more thing you need to know," he said, pulling a flash drive from his pocket. "This contains information about Isabella's true past. She's not who she claims to be, and the marriage to your father is just a piece in a much bigger game." As she put the new flash drive in her purse, Sarah realized she was in the middle of a much more complex web than she had imagined. Her mother hadn't simply disappeared. She was fighting against something, protecting the family from a threat that was only now beginning to take shape. "Why are you helping us?" Emily asked Mark, her voice laden with distrust. An enigmatic smile appeared on his lips. "Let's just say Helen isn't the only person interested in preventing the Phoenix Project from being completed. But we need to act fast. Your father and Isabella return from the Maldives in 3 days, and when that happens—" "What?" Sarah pressed. "When that happens, the final phase of their plan will be put into action. And if we don't stop it, Thompson Enterprises, everything your family has built for generations, will simply disappear." The Thompson Mansion, an imposing construction in the Upper East Side, seemed even more intimidating under the fine autumn drizzle. Sarah parked her Audi in the circular driveway, observing the security cameras her father had recently installed. Next to her in the passenger seat, the folder with the discoveries about the Phoenix Project weighed like lead. Grandma Betty was waiting for her in the solarium, her elegant figure contrasting with the worried expression on her face. "My dear," she said, hugging her granddaughter, "we need to talk about something I've kept for a long time. Your mother made me promise to reveal it only when it was absolutely necessary." The matriarch walked to an old bookshelf and, with a precise movement, revealed a secret compartment behind some books. From there, she retrieved an engraved wooden box that Sarah immediately recognized. It was the wedding gift her grandfather had given to her grandmother 50 years ago. "Before opening this," Grandma Betty began, sitting down with her impeccable posture, as always, "I need to tell you about the empire your grandfather built. Thompson Enterprises didn't start just with hard work. There was a secret, a formula that revolutionized the chemical industry in the 70s. Sarah felt her heart race. Her grandfather, Anthony Thompson, had transformed a small family business into an international conglomerate of chemistry and technology, but the details of his rise had always been kept secret. "The woman who visited me," continued Grandma Betty, "wasn't interested in the Swiss safe. She wanted this." With trembling fingers, she opened the box, revealing a red-covered notebook and a set of microfilms. These are your grandfather's original. Research, the true Phoenix Project. Grandma, I don't understand. What does this have to do with Isabella and my mother? Your mother discovered a few months ago that Isabella didn't really work for a competing company. She's a representative of an international group that has been trying to recreate your grandfather's formula for decades. The marriage to your father is just a way to gain access to the company's files. At this moment, Sarah's cell phone vibrated with a message from Emily. Urgent. I discovered something about Marina Bell. She didn't just change her name, she never existed before. 2018. Sarah showed the message to her grandmother, who turned pale. There's more, said Grandma Betty, pulling a yellowed envelope from the box. Your mother left this with specific instructions about when it should be opened. The envelope contained a series of photographs and documents. In one of the photos, dated 2018, Isabella or Marina appeared at a conference in Geneva, but with another name, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, representative of an American pharmaceutical conglomerate. The original Phoenix Project, explained Grandma Betty, wasn't just a chemical formula. It was a revolutionary molecular synthesis process that could transform the pharmaceutical industry. Your grandfather decided not to patent it when he discovered it could be used for other purposes. He preferred to keep the secret. Sarah began to connect the dots. So Isabella is trying to steal the formula? But why all this elaborate scheme? Because the formula isn't complete without a specific key, a component that your grandfather never recorded anywhere. He passed this secret only to your father, but in a way that even Richard didn't realize. Sarah's cell phone vibrated again, this time with a call from Mark Anderson. Miss Thompson, we have a problem. I just found out that your father and Isabella have anticipated their return from the Maldives. They arrive tomorrow. Grandma Betty squeezed her granddaughter's hand. Sarah, you need to act quickly. Your mother didn't run away. She's working behind the scenes to protect your grandfather's legacy. The flash drive she left contains only half of the information. The other half is with her, completed Sarah, remembering the photo in Singapore. But why split the information? Protection, answered the grandmother. Helen knew Isabella was approaching your father long before the romance began. She set up a safety net, spreading strategic information with trusted people. I'm one of them. Mark is another. Sarah frowned. How can I trust Mark? He appeared out of nowhere in the company. Because, said Grandma Betty, pulling out one last photo from the box, he is the son of Julia Anderson, your grandfather's first assistant, the only person besides him who knew part of the original formula. At that moment, the mansion's doorbell rang. Through the security cameras, Sarah saw Emily running towards the door, carrying her laptop. Her face showed urgency. Sarah, Emily entered breathlessly. You won't believe what I found in the company files. The current Phoenix Project isn't just about the formula. It's a complex operation to take full control of Thompson Enterprises through a series of hostile mergers and acquisitions. Isabella is just the tip of the iceberg. Grandma Betty stood up, her expression graver than ever. There's one more thing you need to know. The woman who visited me. She mentioned a board meeting scheduled for 3 days from now. If we don't, stop it. Your father will sign the final technology transfer to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. And the worst part, added Emily, showing a document on her laptop, is that I found records of bank transfers. Someone is blackmailing your father, Sarah. He's being forced to cooperate. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. In just 3 days, the entire empire built by her grandfather, protected by her mother, could disappear into the hands of an imposter. But there was still a crucial question. Where was Helen and what would be her next move? The sound of a car parking at the mansion's entrance made the 3 women freeze. On the security cameras, they saw Mark Thompson getting out of his Porsche, carrying a briefcase. His face was tense. Miss Stevenson, he said as he entered, I just received a message from your mother. She's coming back to New York, and she's not alone. She's brought with her the only person who can expose Isabel's true identity. Sarah felt her heart racing. The next 72 hours would be decisive not only for the future of Stevenson Enterprises, but for unraveling a plot that began long before she could even imagine. Her father and Isabel's early return was just the beginning. The real confrontation was about to start. The main lobby of JFK International Airport was buzzing with its usual hustle and bustle when Sarah arrived, accompanied by Mark Thompson. It was almost midnight, but the place maintained its frantic pace. Amanda had stayed at the mansion with Grandma Betty, organizing documents and preparing the strategy for the coming days. "The flight from Singapore lands in 40 minutes, said Mark, consulting his Rolex. "Your mother confirmed she'll be on it, along with someone she only refers to as the witness." Sarah nervously adjusted the strap of her bag, where she kept the flash drive with the information about the original Phoenix project. The last 24 hours had been an avalanche of revelations, and her mind was still trying to process everything. "How did you manage to stay in touch with my mother all this time?" she asked, studying the consultant's face. Mark hesitated for a moment. "My mother, Julia Thompson, wasn't just your grandfather's assistant. She and Helen became great friends. When your mother discovered Isabel's plan, she reached out to my mother first. That's how I got involved in the story." Sarah's phone vibrated. It was a message from Amanda. "Urgent. I just hacked into Isabel's corporate email. You need to see this. She's scheduled a secret meeting with Chinese investors for tomorrow at 7 a.m. "This doesn't make sense," Sarah muttered. "Her and my dad's flight doesn't arrive until 10 a.m. Mark took out his own phone, typing quickly. "Unless, Sarah, I think we've been deceived. I just checked. There's another flight arriving from the Maldives, landing in an hour." Sarah's heart froze. Isabel had deliberately released a false arrival time. But why? What was she planning to do at this secret meeting? At that moment, an elegant woman wearing sunglasses and a Hermes scarf approached them. "Sarah, Mark," she said in a low voice. "Follow me. Now." It was Helen. Sarah felt her legs weaken. Her mother looked different, thinner, more tense, but her eyes still held the same determination as always. They followed her to a private first-class lounge, where a middle-aged Asian woman was waiting for them. "This is Dr. Lin Wei," Helen introduced. She was the head of research at the lab in Shanghai, where Isabel, or rather Sarah Mitchell, worked in 2017. And she has a very interesting story to tell. Dr. Lin opened her folder, revealing a series of documents. Sarah Mitchell wasn't an ordinary researcher. She was sent by a group called Phoenix Global to steal our bioengineering technology. When we discovered her, she had already disappeared, along with years of research and millions in funding. "Phoenix Global," Sarah murmured. "The same name that appears on the Cayman Islands documents." Helen nodded. "It's no coincidence. Phoenix Global is an organization that specializes in industrial espionage and hostile takeovers. They discovered your grandfather's formula and have been trying to recreate it for years. Isabel is their best operative." "But why now?" asked Mark. "Because," Helen replied, "the deadline for the provisional patent your grandfather registered is about to expire. In 3 days, if the formula isn't officially registered, it falls into the public domain. Their plan is twofold: obtain the complete formula and take control of the company before that happens." Sarah frowned. "But you said Grandpa never patented the formula. He registered an incomplete version as insurance. The crucial part, the molecular catalyst, was passed verbally to your father through a riddle. Richard doesn't even know he carries this secret." Mark's phone rang. It was Amanda. "The plane from the Maldives just landed," she informed. "And there's more. I found coded emails between Isabel and someone inside the company. She has an accomplice." Helen grabbed her purse. "That's why we need to act now. Sarah, you and Mark will intercept your father at the arrival gate. Dr. Lin and I have a meeting with the Interpol Ethics Board in 15 minutes, via video conference." "Interpol?" Sarah's eyes widened. "Just to legally document everything," Helen explained. "We don't want Phoenix Global to escape this time. But remember, Isabel can't know we're here. The element of surprise is our only advantage." As they rushed to the arrival terminal, Sarah received another message, this time from the unknown number. "The Swiss vault doesn't contain money. Your grandfather's true inheritance is there. Code 25 to 47 1968. Mark looked over her shoulder. "That sequence. Sarah, those are the chemical coordinates of the original formula. Your grandfather transformed the formula into a numerical code. In the arrival hall, the electronic board indicated that the flight from the Maldives had landed. In minutes, Richard and Isabel would walk through those doors. Sarah felt the weight of the moment. She had only one chance to convince her father before Isabel could intervene. "There's one more thing you need to know," said Mark, his voice tense. "Isabel's accomplice inside the company. I'm almost certain I know who it is. And when you find out, you'll understand why your father is being so cooperative." Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. The arrival doors began to open, and she could see her father's familiar silhouette approaching. Beside him, Isabel walked, with the confidence of someone who believed they had won the game. What none of them knew was that, at that exact moment, Grandma Betty was opening a secret compartment in her library, revealing a set of documents that would completely change the course of this story. Inside an old folder, a yellowed photograph showed her late husband next to a young Julia Thompson, Mark's mother. On the back, a single sentence: "The true Phoenix Project isn't in the formula, but in what it represents." The moment Sarah had been dreading finally arrived. Her father emerged through the arrival gate, his face tired from the trip, but still maintaining that imposing posture that characterized him as the leader of Stevenson Enterprises. Isabel, at his side, displayed a confident smile that instantly dissolved upon seeing Sarah and Mark. "Sweetie," Richard furrowed his brow, surprised. "What are you doing here at this hour?" Before Sarah could answer, Isabel intervened, her mellifluous voice carrying a note of urgency. "Darling, we're exhausted. We can resolve any issues tomorrow at the company." "No, we can't," Sarah stepped forward, feeling adrenaline rush through her veins. "Dad, we need to talk. Now it's about Project Phoenix." Richard's face visibly paled, while Isabel let out an almost inaudible sound of surprise. Mark discreetly positioned himself between the group and the exit, his body tense like a spring, about to release. "How did you—" Richard began, but was interrupted by the sound of his cell phone. It was a text message. "The riddle your father told you on your graduation day, remember it? Helen." He looked around, frantically searching for his wife. At that exact moment, in the Stevenson mansion, Grandma Betty and Amanda were making a crucial discovery. Among the documents from the secret compartment, they found a diary of Anthony Stevenson with a specific entry about the riddle. When the sun rises in the east and the moon rests in the west, the firebird is reborn from the molecular ashes. The secret isn't in the formula, but in the sequence. Amanda was furiously typing on her laptop, correlating the information. "Mrs. Stevenson, look at this!" she exclaimed. "The coordinates of the Swiss vault. They're not just numbers, they're the activation sequence for the catalyst." Back at the airport, Sarah was facing Isabel's icy stare. "I know who you really are. Sarah Mitchell, or should I say Phoenix Global Agent." Isabel maintained her composure, but her eyes betrayed a flash of concern. "Impressive, Sarah, just like your mother, always sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. But you're too late. The meeting with the Chinese investors is cancelled." Helen's voice cut through the air like a razor. She emerged from behind a column, accompanied by Dr. Lin and two executives from the Stevenson Enterprises board. "As are your false credentials, Sarah," Richard staggered, leaning against a nearby column. "Helen, but how?" "I never went to India, Richard," Helen approached her husband. "I've been investigating Phoenix Global, gathering evidence, but I needed to distance myself to protect you and Sarah. They threatened our family." "It's true," Mark added, showing his phone. "I just received confirmation. Interpol has just frozen all of Phoenix Global's accounts in the Cayman Islands." Isabel laughed, a cold and calculated sound. "You really think that changes anything? Richard has already signed the technology transfer. In 3 days, when the provisional patent expires—" "The patent won't expire," Sarah interrupted, a triumphant smile on her lips. "Because Grandpa's original registration is safe in the Swiss vault. And now we have the complete catalyst sequence." Sarah's phone vibrated with a message from Amanda. "We did it. Mr. Anthony's riddle. It's the catalyst activation instructions. Grandma Betty just confirmed it with the original documents." This moment, one of the board executives approached Richard. "Mr. Stevenson, we just received notification. All recent transfers have been blocked by international compliance, including those from Dr. Fernando's personal account. Fernando? Sarah's eyes widened. Dr. Fernando had been the family's trusted lawyer for over 30 years. He's the accomplice? Helen nodded sadly. He was blackmailing your father with forged documents, threatening to expose supposed irregularities in Stevenson Enterprises. That's how Phoenix Global managed to pressure Richard into cooperating. Isabel, seeing her plan crumble, tried one last gambit. Richard, think carefully. Your father's formula is worth billions. We can still make this work. You, me, enough! Richard's voice thundered through the lobby. Enough lies. He turned to Helen, his eyes watery. Forgive me. I should have trusted you. Mark's phone rang. It was his mother, Julia Thompson. Son, I found it. The last document Anthony entrusted to me before he passed. It's a letter addressed to Richard, explaining why he never commercialized the complete formula. You need to see this. Sarah looked at her parents, at Mark, at Isabel, who was now being discreetly restrained by airport security. Somewhere in that confusion of feelings and revelations, there was still one last truth to be uncovered. A truth that her grandfather had guarded until the end, protected by a network of loyal people and an apparently simple riddle. The sun was rising on the New York horizon when Grandma Betty finally opened the last envelope from the secret compartment. Inside, an old photograph showed Anthony Stevenson in his laboratory, and on the back a message that would forever change the understanding of Project Phoenix. The true treasure isn't in the formula, but in what we choose to do with it. Some discoveries are too powerful to belong to just one person or company. The real legacy is in protecting knowledge until the world is ready to use it wisely. The main conference room of Stevenson Enterprises, on the top floor of the headquarters building, was silent that morning. The sun was rising over New York, painting the sky in golden hues that reflected off the mirrored windows of neighboring buildings. Richard sat at the head of the oval table, his hands resting on an old leather folder, his father's diary, Anthony Stevenson. Helen occupied the chair to his right, while Sarah and Mark sat on the opposite side. Grandma Betty presided over the other end of the table, her regal posture contrasting with the weariness evident in her eyes after a sleepless night. Amanda was organizing documents on her laptop, preparing for the video conference with the board that would begin shortly. I still can't believe it, Richard murmured, breaking the silence. All these years, the riddle my father told me, I never imagined it was literally the key to everything. Helen extended her hand, gently touching her husband's arm. Your father was a brilliant man, Richard. He knew the formula needed to be protected, not just from ill-intentioned people, but also from market greed. You knew all along, didn't you, Grandma? Sarah asked, looking at Betty with admiration. The matriarch nodded softly. Your grandfather entrusted different parts of the secret to different people. Julia Thompson received the technical documents. I kept the story behind the formula. And your father, she smiled at Richard, received the key without even knowing it. Mark checked his phone. My mother is on her way with the original documents. She told me something interesting about the past, about how she met Mr. Anthony. Ah, yes, Grandma Betty smiled nostalgically. Julia was more than an assistant. She was the first person to understand the true potential of Anthony's discovery. She helped him realize that some discoveries are too powerful to be controlled by a single entity. Amanda looked up from her laptop. Gentlemen, the lawyers just confirmed all attempts at technology transfer have been officially blocked. Phoenix Global didn't manage to access any critical information. And Isabel, or Sarah? Sarah asked. She's being investigated by international authorities, Mark replied. Dr. Lin provided substantial evidence of her activities in Asia. She won't be bothering anyone for a long time. Richard opened his father's diary, revealing an old photograph showing Anthony Stevenson in his original laboratory, a small space in the back of the house where it all began. All this time, I thought my father's legacy was the company, the empire he built, but it was much more than that. The real legacy, Helen completed, was the network of trust he created, people dedicated to protecting not just a formula, but a principle. Sarah took out her phone, showing the last message from the unknown. Number: "The firebird doesn't rise from the ashes, but from the wisdom of waiting for the right moment." "It was you all along, wasn't it, Grandma?" Sarah smiled at Betty. "The mysterious messages." The matriarch let out a soft laugh. "Your mother taught me how to use anonymous messaging apps. Who would have thought that at 78 I'd become an expert in secret communication?" At this moment, Julia Thompson entered the room carrying an old briefcase. Her eyes met Betty's, and decades of complicity passed silently between the two women. "I brought everything," said Julia, placing the briefcase on the table. "The original documents, the research notes, and this." She pulled out a sealed envelope. "Anthony asked me to deliver this when the time was right. I think that time has finally come." Richard took the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a letter and an old key. "My dear son," he began to read aloud, his voice choked with emotion. "If you're reading this, it means you've understood the true meaning of Project Phoenix. It's not about a chemical formula or corporate power. It's about choices, about understanding. That true progress doesn't come from unbridled competition, but from collaboration and wisdom." Helen squeezed her husband's hand, while Sarah felt silent tears running down her face. "The key," Richard continued, "opens a safe in the main laboratory. There you'll find my last discovery, an evolution of the original formula. But you'll also find something more important, a plan to transform Stevenson Enterprises into a collaborative research foundation where scientists from around the world can work together for the common good." Amanda, who was typing rapidly on her laptop, gently interrupted. "Excuse me, but you need to see this. The news about Phoenix Global's attempted hostile takeover has just leaked to the press. Stevenson Enterprises stocks, they're rising. The market is reacting positively to the company's resistance against predatory acquisition." Of course, Mark smiled. "The market is finally recognizing the value of integrity." Julia approached Betty, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Anthony would be proud. His plan worked exactly as he predicted." "What plan?" Sarah asked. "Your grandfather knew that one day someone would try to take control of the company by force," Betty explained. "So he created a protection system based on what's strongest in the world: trust and loyalty. Each person in this room represents a part of that system." Richard looked at Helen, his eyes full of regret and love. "Forgive me for not trusting you from the beginning. The important thing is that we're all together now," Helen replied, smiling, "and we have a new challenge ahead of us." "The Research Foundation?" Sarah asked. "Not just that," Mark replied. "My mother and I have been analyzing the old documents, the evolution of the formula your grandfather mentions. It could revolutionize the treatment of various diseases, but only if it's developed collaboratively, with scientists from different fields working together." Amanda raised her hand, drawing everyone's attention. "The board is ready for the video conference. They want to discuss the company's restructuring and the launch of the foundation." Richard stood up, his posture now carrying not just authority, but also a new understanding of his role. "Then let's begin. It's time to honor the true legacy of Project Phoenix." As the video conference screen lit up and the faces of the board members appeared, Sarah looked at her gathered family. In just a few days, they had gone through betrayal, discoveries, and reconciliation, but most importantly, they had rediscovered the true meaning of trust and unity. The sun was already high in the São Paulo sky, its light dancing through the windows of the meeting room, illuminating the beginning of a new chapter in the Mendoza family history, a chapter based not on secrets and power, but on collaboration and purpose. The main auditorium of Mendoza Enterprises was packed. 2 weeks had passed since the revelations about Phoenix Global, and that morning marked the official announcement of the largest restructuring in the company's history. Journalists, executives, and researchers from around the world eagerly awaited the start of the presentation. Sarah observed the backstage movement, nervously adjusting the navy blue blazer she had chosen for the occasion. Beside her, Amanda was reviewing the presentation slides on her tablet one last time. "All the documents for the new foundation have been registered," Amanda whispered. The technology transfer to the International Research Consortium is officially approved. Helen appeared elegantly dressed in an off-white ensemble, carrying a folder with the new logo of the Mendoza Advanced Research Foundation. The representatives of the partner laboratories have just arrived. Dr. Lin is escorting them to their seats. Richard appeared shortly after, his countenance lighter than Sarah remembered seeing in years. The decision to transform a significant part of Mendoza Enterprises into a collaborative research foundation had restored the sparkle in his eyes that so reminded her of his father, Anthony. "Mark just confirmed," he said, checking his cell phone. "The preliminary results of the tests with the perfected catalyst are promising. The medical applications may be even more revolutionary than we imagined." Grandma Beatrice approached the group, leaning on her noble wooden cane, but maintaining her regal posture as always. "Julia is bringing the original documents from Anthony's laboratory. She thinks she found something in his notes that could accelerate the development process even further." In the auditorium, the lights began to dim, signaling the start of the presentation. Sarah felt her heart race. She would open the event with a speech about her grandfather's legacy and the new direction of the company. "Nervous?" asked Helen, affectionately adjusting the collar of her daughter's blazer. "A little," Sarah admitted. "It's an enormous responsibility." "You're a Mendoza," smiled Grandma Beatrice. "Carrying responsibilities with grace is in our blood." The murmur in the auditorium decreased as Amanda took the stage to make the initial introductions. In the front row, Sarah could see familiar faces: Julia Thompson sitting next to Mark, Dr. Lin accompanied by her team of researchers, and various board members who had supported the company's transformation. "Ladies and gentlemen," Amanda's voice echoed through the sound system, "it is with great honor that we present the new phase of Mendoza Enterprises and the launch of the Mendoza Advanced Research Foundation." Sarah took a deep breath and walked to the stage. The flashes of cameras fired, but her eyes found those of her family in the front row, giving her the strength she needed. "Over 40 years ago," she began, her voice firm, "my grandfather Anthony Mendoza made a discovery that could have transformed our company into a global monopoly. But he chose a different path. He understood that some discoveries are greater than individual or corporate interests." The screens behind her showed historical photos of the original laboratory, including that special one where Anthony appeared alongside a young Julia Thompson, both smiling at the camera with the enthusiasm of those who knew they were changing the world. "Today," Sarah continued, "we honor that vision not just by preserving his legacy, but by expanding it. The Mendoza Advanced Research Foundation will be a global center for scientific collaboration where the best minds in the world will work together to transform knowledge into benefits for humanity." Richard and Helen took the stage for the symbolic signing of the Foundation's constitution documents. The moment was marked by enthusiastic applause when Julia Thompson and Dr. Lin joined them, representing the union between the visionary past and the promising future. Backstage, Amanda received a notification on her tablet that made her smile. The company's stocks were soaring on the stock market, proving that the market approved of the new ethical and collaborative direction. After the official ceremony, a cocktail reception was served in the building's winter garden. Sarah observed the groups that formed, scientists animatedly discussing with executives, journalists interviewing researchers, an energy of infinite possibilities in the air. "Your grandfather would be proud," said Mark, approaching with 2 glasses of champagne. "Not just of the company's transformation, but especially of how your family united to protect and expand his legacy." Sarah accepted the glass, watching the golden bubbles dance. "You know what's most incredible? How something that started with an attempt at destruction ended up strengthening us. The best transformations often arise from the greatest challenges," Mark philosophized, his gaze meeting Sarah's with an intensity that made her heart skip a beat. Across the room, Helen and Richard were talking with international investors, their hands discreetly intertwined, a simple gesture that demonstrated how the last few weeks had reconnected not just their business partnership, but especially their emotional bond. Grandma Beatrice, sitting in her favorite chair near the central fountain, observed everything with a satisfied smile. Julia Thompson joined her, the two matriarchs sharing a moment of silent celebration. Anthony always said, Julia commented, that the true value of a discovery lies not in its commercial potential, but in its ability to unite people around a greater purpose. And as always, replied Grandma Beatrice, he was right. The afternoon sun in São Paulo filtered through the glass ceiling of the winter garden, creating a kaleidoscope of lights that danced over those present. Sarah felt a deep sense of peace and purpose. Project Phoenix had been reborn not from the ashes of destruction, but from the union of people committed to something greater than themselves. Amanda discreetly approached Sarah, showing a message on her cell phone. The first results of tests with the perfected catalyst indicated potentially revolutionary applications in the treatment of autoimmune diseases. It was just the beginning of a new era of discoveries, this time conducted not by secrecy and competition, but by collaboration and transparency. "What do we do now?" asked Amanda, putting away her phone. Sarah smiled, observing her family gathered, stronger and more united than ever. "Now," she replied, "we begin the real work. Grandpa's legacy wasn't about protecting a formula. It was about creating something that could grow and evolve through generations." Mark raised his glass in a silent toast, his eyes conveying a message that words couldn't express. The future opened before them, full of possibilities and promises, grounded in the strength of family ties and the vision of a man who knew how to see beyond his time. The first meeting of the Mendoza Foundation's Scientific Council was scheduled to begin in 15 minutes, and the atmosphere in the conference room was electrified. Sarah organized her notes while observing the arriving participants, an eclectic mix of renowned scientists, executives, and researchers from various countries. Mark hurriedly entered, carrying a thick folder with the latest clinical trial reports. His eyes met Sarah's, and a discreet smile was exchanged between them. In recent weeks, their work meetings often extended into dinners, where they talked about much more than business projects. "We have a problem," Amanda whispered, approaching with her tablet. "3 members of the traditional board are threatening to resign. They think we're dedicating too many resources to research and neglecting the commercial side of the company." Sarah sighed, running her hand through her hair. The transformation wouldn't be easy. She knew that from the beginning. "Who are the dissenters?" "Albert Mendez, Charles Drummond, and Victoria Fisher," Amanda replied. "The same ones who were always against any changes to the business model." Helen, who had just entered the room accompanied by Dr. Lin, noticed the tension on her daughter's face. "Already heard about the resignation threats?" she asked softly. "Yes, but we have something that might change their minds," Sarah replied, pulling a document from her folder. "The preliminary results of the tests with the modified catalyst. The applications are even more promising than we imagined." Richard joined the group, adjusting his new tie, a gift from Helen that symbolized their fresh start together. "The laboratory in Singapore just confirmed we managed to replicate the results. The experimental treatment had 92% efficacy in initial tests." Grandma Beatrice, who was observing everything from her special chair near the head of the table, made a gesture, calling Sarah. "Dear, before starting the meeting, there's something you need to see." She pulled an old envelope from her purse. "I found this yesterday, organizing your grandfather's last documents." The envelope contained a letter dated 1985, addressed to the future leaders of Mendoza Enterprises. Sarah began to read softly, while Mark, Helen, and Richard approached to listen. "To those who carry the future of our legacy, I know there will be resistance to change. The fear of the new is as old as humanity itself. But remember, true innovation isn't just in chemical formulas or industrial processes. It's in the courage to choose the harder path when it's the right one. The formula I discovered could generate incalculable fortunes if exploited commercially without restrictions, but it can also save countless lives if developed wisely and shared responsibly. For those who resist change, show them not just the numbers, but the real impact on people's lives. The true value of a company isn't measured only in profits, but in the legacy it leaves for future generations. With love and hope, Anthony Mendoza." Julia Thompson, who had arrived silently during the reading, discreetly wiped away a tear, Anthony always knew this day would come. That's why he built so many safeguards, involved so many different people in protecting his legacy. At that moment, the dissenting board members entered the room, their tense expressions revealing the confrontation that was about to come. But Sarah now had a new weapon in her arsenal, not just the impressive test results, but also her grandfather's wise words. The meeting began with the presentation of the new data. Dr. Lin, with her characteristic scientific precision, detailed the advances achieved in recent weeks. Matt complemented with financial projections showing how the collaborative model could generate sustainable value in the long term. "But what about the shareholders?" interrupted Albert Mendez, his voice laden with skepticism. "How will we justify this redirection of resources?" It was then that Sarah made her boldest move. "Mr. Mendez, allow me to introduce someone." She signaled, and a young girl in a wheelchair entered the room, accompanied by her parents. "This is Mary Claire, one of the first patients to receive the experimental treatment based on the modified catalyst." The girl smiled, her cheeks rosy with health, a dramatic contrast to the photographs from 6 months ago that Sarah projected on the screen, showing her in a debilitated state in the hospital. "The profits from the last quarter," Sarah continued, her voice firm, "were 18% higher than the same period last year. But this smile, this transformed life, that's priceless." Victoria Peixoto, one of the most skeptical board members, shifted uneasily in her chair. "And do you have more cases like this?" 217 so far, Matt replied, projecting a global map with bright spots representing each patient under treatment. "And this is just the beginning." Richard stood up, his presence commanding everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, when my father founded this company, he didn't just dream of profits, he dreamed of transformation. Today, we're not just honoring his legacy, we're expanding it." Helen, who had been observing silently until then, added, "Investors aren't just supporting our change of direction, they're celebrating it. The company's stock reached its highest historical value this morning." One by one, the board members began to show signs of changing their positions. The decisive moment came when Grandma Bernice, with her matriarchal authority, shared personal stories about Anthony's visionary decisions that, although initially questioned, proved revolutionary. By the end of the meeting, not only had the three dissenters withdrawn their threats of resignation, but they had also committed to supporting the expansion of the research program. The transformation of Mendoza Enterprises was truly underway. As the participants dispersed, Sarah found a moment of quiet near the window. Matt approached, offering a cup of the special coffee she so enjoyed. "Impressive how you handled the situation," he commented, his admiration evident. Sarah smiled, feeling the warmth of the cup between her hands. "I learned from the best. My grandfather, my parents, my grandmother, each of them taught me something about leadership and purpose." "And about love?" Matt asked softly, his eyes fixed on hers. Before Sarah could answer, Amy appeared with urgent news. The results of the tests in Singapore had been publicly released, and the repercussion in the scientific community was extraordinary. A new phase was beginning, one that would require even more courage, dedication, and above all, unity. The sun was setting over New York, painting the sky in golden and rosy hues. In the emptied meeting room, only the echoes of an ongoing transformation remained, not just of a company, but of lives, relationships, and dreams that were beginning to take new shapes. The Anthony Mendoza Advanced Research Center, inaugurated 3 months ago on the Foundation's campus, was buzzing with activity on that spring morning. Scientists from various countries circulated through the modern corridors, while in the common areas, groups of researchers animatedly discussed the latest advances in their projects. Sarah walked through the central garden alongside Matt, reviewing the preparations for the Foundation's first international symposium, which would take place the following week. The space, designed with large windows and integrated green areas, perfectly reflected the philosophy of transparency and collaboration that now guided Mendoza Enterprises. "The numbers in the latest report are impressive," Matt commented, consulting his tablet. "More than 1,000 patients have already benefited from the experimental treatment program, and collaborative patents have generated a 40% increase in stock value since the restructuring. Sarah smiled, stopping near a decorative fountain that reproduced the phoenix symbol in water and light. You know what's most incredible? Seeing how each person here is genuinely committed to something greater than themselves. In the main laboratory, Helen coordinated a video conference with research teams from 5 different countries. The Catalyst Expansion Project had discovered new applications in the areas of biotechnology and renewable energy, opening horizons that not even Anthony Mendoza could have imagined. "Sarah," called Amy, approaching hurriedly with her inseparable notebook. "Science magazine just confirmed. Our article on the molecular synthesis process will be the cover story of the next issue." The news quickly spread through the research center, prompting a small impromptu celebration. Richard, who was participating in a meeting with investors on the upper floor, came down to join the celebration. "Your grandfather always said," he commented, hugging his daughter, "that true success isn't measured by the awards we receive, but by the impact we have on people's lives." Grandma Bernice, who spent more and more time at the research center, supervising the preservation of the family's historical legacy, approached the group, leaning on her cane. "And speaking of impact, have you heard about Dr. Lin's team's latest discovery?" Julia Thompson, who had just returned from a trip to Singapore, where she had overseen the implementation of a new partner laboratory, joined the conversation. "The preliminary results are extraordinary. The new compound derived from the original catalyst has shown potential to revolutionize the treatment of neurodegenerative diseases." Sarah felt Matt's gentle touch on her back, a gesture of support. That had become increasingly frequent in recent weeks. Their work meetings had naturally evolved into prolonged dinners and deep conversations about dreams and aspirations. "By the way," Amy commented with a mischievous smile, "have you decided which restaurant to choose for the celebration?" "Celebration?" Helen asked, curious. Sarah blushed slightly. "Matt invited me to dinner tonight. It's a special date. It's exactly 1 year since we met, during all that confusion with Phoenix Global." "Ah, love," Grandma Bernice sighed theatrically, provoking laughter in the group, always finding its way in the most unexpected moments. Richard observed the scene with a serene smile. The company's transformation had not only strengthened the business but also provided a deep reconnection with Helen. Together, they had rediscovered not only their love for each other, but also the shared purpose of building something meaningful. "Mrs. Mendoza," called a young researcher approaching the group, "the Sustainable Development Team has something to show. We managed to adapt the catalyst process for environmental bioremediation." The group followed the researcher to one of the laboratories where an impressive demonstration showed how the technology could be used to clean contaminated areas without environmental impact. It was further proof of how the decision to share knowledge had multiplied its beneficial potential. At the end of the afternoon, as the sun set over the Foundation's campus, Sarah found a moment of quiet in her office. The walls displayed a mix of old photographs, her grandfather in his original laboratory, her parents at the beginning of the company, and now new images of the research center in full activity. Matt knocked softly on the door. "Ready for our dinner?" "Almost," she replied, putting away some documents. "I just need to finalize the opening speech for the symposium." "Let me guess," he smiled, approaching. "You're going to talk about how the greatest discoveries are born from collaboration and trust?" "Actually," Sarah stood up, grabbing her purse, "I'm going to talk about how sometimes we need to face great challenges to discover our true strength, and how love, in all its forms, is the greatest catalyst for transformations." They walked hand in hand through the central garden, now illuminated by soft lights that created an almost magical environment. In the main laboratory, some teams were still working, driven by the passion for discovery that had become the trademark of the Foundation. "You know," Matt commented, stopping near the Phoenix fountain, "your mother told me something interesting today. She said your grandfather had a theory that the greatest scientific discoveries are like love. They need time, dedication, and, most importantly, courage to flourish." Sarah smiled, realizing how that theory applied perfectly to the history of her family, the company, and now her own heart. The legacy of Project Phoenix had transformed into something much greater than a chemical formula. It was a testament to the power of unity, perseverance, and the human capacity to evolve through love and wisdom. As they left the campus, the New York sky filled with stars, like small points of light guiding the way to a bright future. A future built not on secrets and competition, but on the transformative power of collaboration and love. The sun was rising over New York when the first guests began to arrive at the main auditorium of the Anthony Mendoza Research Center. The first international symposium on advanced research was about to begin, marking the one-year anniversary of the transformation of Mendoza Enterprises. Sarah observed the movement from the VIP room, where her family gathered for final preparations. Helen adjusted Richard's tie, in a gesture that now carried not only affection, but the renewed complicity of a couple who had overcome great challenges together. Grandma Bernice, elegant as always in her blue silk ensemble, chatted animatedly with Julia Thompson about the latest documents discovered in the family's historical archive. The two matriarchs had become inseparable, united by the mission of preserving and expanding Anthony Mendoza's legacy. "The representatives from all partner laboratories have arrived," announced Amy, consulting her list. "We have researchers from 27 countries. It's the largest collaborative scientific event of the year." Matt entered the room, carrying a small antique box that made Sarah's eyes shine with recognition. It was the jewelry box that her grandfather had given to her grandmother on their wedding day. "We found this in the Swiss safe," he explained, placing the box on the central table, "along with your grandfather's last letter." The family gathered around the table as Sarah carefully opened the jewelry box. Inside, beside some old family jewels, there was a yellowed envelope with Anthony Mendoza's characteristic handwriting. "My beloved family," Sarah began to read aloud. "If you are reading this letter, it means that Project Phoenix has finally reached its true purpose." It wasn't about a chemical formula or corporate power. It was about unity, trust, and the courage to choose the right path, even when it seems the most difficult. Helen held Richard's hand, while Grandma Bernice discreetly wiped away a tear. "The true legacy I leave," Sarah continued, her voice choked with emotion, "isn't in the laboratories or bank vaults. It's in the hearts of people who choose day after day to use knowledge to make the world a better place. It's in the love that unites our family, and in the wisdom to understand that together we are stronger." Dr. Lin entered the room at this moment, accompanied by her team. "Sorry to interrupt, but you need to see this." She projected on the screen the latest results from global tests, more than 5,000 patients treated, with a success rate above 95%. "And this is just the beginning," Matt added. "The environmental applications of the catalyst are revolutionizing pollution remediation processes on 3 continents. Amy checked her watch. "It's time. The auditorium is packed." Sarah carefully put the letter back in the jewelry box, feeling the weight of history and responsibility in her hands. Matt approached, offering his arm in a gesture of support that had become natural between them. "Before we go," said Grandma Bernice, taking something from her purse, "there's one more thing." She handed Sarah a small package. "Your grandfather left this specifically to be opened today." Inside the package was a delicate gold brooch in the shape of a phoenix, studded with small precious stones. "It belonged to your great-grandmother," explained Grandma Bernice. "Anthony gave it to her the day he decided to transform the small family business into something bigger. He said it was a symbol of rebirth and transformation." Sarah pinned the brooch to her blazer, feeling a deep connection with the generations that preceded her. Beside her, Matt smiled, his eyes conveying all the love and admiration that words couldn't express. The group walked together to the auditorium. On stage, a presentation showed images of the company's history, from the small laboratory where it all began to the international complex it had become. But more impressive were the photographs of recovered patients, restored environmental areas, young scientists developing new applications for the technology. Richard took the stage first, his presence commanding as always, but now softened by hard-won wisdom. "A year ago," he began, Our company faced its greatest transformation, but what seemed like a challenge revealed itself as our greatest blessing. Helen followed, sharing her perspective on how adversity had strengthened not only the business, but especially family bonds. Julia Thompson and Dr. Lin presented the impressive scientific results of the past year. Finally, it was time for Sarah to give her speech. Standing in the center of the stage, she looked at her family in the front row, her father and mother holding hands, her grandmother radiant with pride, Matt with his encouraging smile. In the following rows, hundreds of researchers, doctors, and scientists who had become part of this extended family. Project Phoenix, she began, was born from a brilliant scientific discovery, but its true power has always been in people. In my mother's courage to protect our family, in my father's wisdom to choose love over power, in my grandmother's strength to preserve our legacy, in the commitment of every researcher, doctor, and collaborator who chose to be part of this journey. The auditorium lights reflected on the phoenix brooch on her chest, creating small rainbows that danced across the stage. Today we celebrate not just scientific discoveries or business successes, we celebrate the transformative power of love, trust, and collaboration. We celebrate the true legacy of Anthony Mendoza, not a chemical formula, but a life formula based on unity, purpose, and the courage to dream big. As applause filled the auditorium, Sarah felt that her grandfather somehow was present, smiling with approval. Project Phoenix had truly been reborn, not from the ashes of destruction, but from the power of love, family unity, and the determination to make a difference in the world. And so, under the blue sky of New York, a new era began, not just for Mendoza Enterprises or the Research Foundation, but for all those who believed in the transformative power of shared dreams and unconditional love. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of the Mendoza family has touched your hearts as much as it touched ours. To continue this journey of emotions and discoveries, we have prepared a special playlist with equally engaging stories about love, overcoming challenges, and transformation. Find it by clicking on the link to the left. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave your like. Every day we bring new stories that explore the complexity and beauty of human relationships. Share with us in the comments which city you're watching from and your impressions of this exciting family saga. We continue together on this journey of stories that inspire and transform.